Welcome to Eternal Dread, where fear never sleeps. Tell us where you're watching from, and what time it is, because terror has no limits. If you're brave enough, share and comment, but beware, something might be watching you too. Now, turn off the lights, and let the dread begin. On the city line sits an old, rotting grocery store. It's been there as long as I can remember, which is at least 16 years. Honestly, I'm not sure if it's ever really been in business. Everyone I've ever spoken to has never shopped there. Hell, I'm pretty sure no one has even ever stepped foot in the place. Right now, I'm enrolled in a research class in my high school. The class was structured to where you did 3 projects. 1 group project, 1 research paper about a specific topic given by the teacher, and then the final research paper about any topic of your choosing. My last 2 projects were okay. I made A's on them, but this final is the real reason I took the class. I needed to learn about this old grocery store. I don't know why I had this obsession with it. I live on the other side of town. I have no ties to the store. But something about it is so alluring. It pulls me in like worms on a hook pulling fish. I haven't gotten a good chance to go by the place. There's old police tape all around the parking lot, and the doors are boarded up with 2x4s. There isn't much news about the place, and I've had to do almost all my research at the local library. The librarian, Mrs. Collins, is sweet and lets me use the archives free of charge. I'm grateful for that. She seems to be very interested in my research project. I think she's like me. The old place pulls her in as well, but I don't think it's got its talons in her like it does me. I'd pile up in a small corner of the 2nd floor, pulling 5 or so books off the shelves at a time. Occasionally Mrs. Collins would check in on me, and now and then she'd bring me some snacks or a bottle of water. I have to admit, we've grown quite close. Clara? Dear, it's late, her soft voice spoke, snapping me out of my trance. Okay, I'm busy, I brushed her off. It's 7:30 and I need to head home soon. You've been here for hours, she explained, walking over to me and picking up a few books I had discarded. This was a common conversation we had. I'd get absorbed in my research and she'd be there to kick me out. I did appreciate her. It was the only reason that I would go home most days. There were only 2 times I found it mentioned in newspapers, its opening and closing dates. It opened on Monday, July 22nd, 1996. Then, the place closed in December of that same year. I couldn't find an exact date of closing, but the headlines were published on Monday, December 16th, 1996. It was run by some old married couple, the Smiths. I have an interview set up with this guy, Samuel Withers, who was close with the Smiths. Mr. Withers is that crazy old man character. Lives at the end of the street in a decaying house. Yells at kids to get off his lawn. You get the picture. Since there was so little information, actually there was no information about the Smiths, I was hoping he could give me some insight. But before then, I needed to check the place out. I figured that seeing it in person could teach me a lot about it. So, that brings me to tonight. About 3 hours ago, I was standing in the parking lot, dressed in all black and hidden in the dark of the night. I had a flashlight, my phone, a camera, a hammer, and a gas mask. I had thought this all through. Take as many pictures as I could and document everything. Don't touch anything, don't breathe in anything, etc. This place had been abandoned for nearly a year. No telling how toxic the air was, hence the gas mask. I parked my car across the street. Nobody was out here, and the police weren't patrolling the area. Nobody ever came this way anyways. Gripping the hammer tightly, I stalked over to the door and evaluated the planks of wood. It looked like the wood boarding up the doors was rotting. I pushed on my gas mask, not wanting to die today, and started swinging. The wood broke with ease, splinters flying everywhere. A few nails fell to the ground, and eventually the whole thing caved in on itself. Stepping inside and shining my light, the smell of rot hit me in the face. Holy shit, I mumbled, taking a small step back and reaching to cover my nose. God, it smelled so bad. Like an old tuna fish sandwich that had been left in a wet sock that was found 2 days later in the woods with animal shit on it. I moved forward, stepping over the splintered wood and avoiding the nails. The first thing I noticed was the registers, coated in a thick layer of dust. I stepped over broken pieces of wood to get a better look and began to take pictures. It looked like everyone had been shopping normally, and then just suddenly disappeared. There was food still on the conveyor belts, a few cans of food here and there, and what I assumed was meat and fruit sat on most others. 2 of the registers were open, money was still inside the drawers. There were receipts on the ground around the registers, like the cashier had been handing them to the customer. As I continued to walk through the mess, I was astonished by everything. There were bugs and rats everywhere. Every time I watched a roach crawl across the floor, I shuddered. Any noise a rat made had me jumping and looking over my shoulder. The place screamed, "I'm haunted." I looked up and down the vast aisles, taking pictures of everything. Cans of food that had fallen off the shelves and broken open coated the floor. The random and unknown liquids that pooled around the freezers. The place didn't look looted, just a husk of what used to be a busy supermarket. I ended up in a snack aisle. The vast row of unopened chip bags and Jiffy Pop pans were most likely the only thing the rodents and bugs couldn't get into. As I reached the end of the aisle, an even worse smell hit my nose. I was standing at the back of the store, where all the meat was kept. Oh God, it smelt so bad. It looked even worse. Roaches, flies, rats, and maggots were everywhere, much worse than anywhere else in the store. Snapping a few more pictures, I had to turn away from multiple unidentified pieces, just because of how nasty they were. I was shocked there was anything still left, and a part of me really wished it had all already decayed. I thought briefly for a moment, shouldn't it already be gone? It's been months since this place closed. But I didn't dwell too much on the thought. I honestly just wanted to get away from the smell. As I turned to walk along the back of the store, I noticed two large swinging doors. I know it was stupid to go back there, but I needed to see. I just had to know what was back there. As I swung open the large metal doors, I shined my light across the room and instantly wished I hadn't. Sitting along the back wall was a person. I didn't get a good look at them. The moment their head snapped around to look at me, I booked it out of there. I dropped my hammer, letting out a blood-curdling scream and spinning on my heels. Racing back through the store, I could hear heavy footsteps following. They were yelling, a deep and raspy voice screaming at me to get back here. It sounded like they hadn't spoken in months. The voice was so hoarse and scratchy. I shot out the front door, nearly breaking my stride as I pushed past the rotted wood and across the parking lot. As I made it to my car, I glanced back to see the shadow of a person standing in the door. They were tall, lanky. Hair stretched down far, at least down to their back. From what I could tell, it looked like a man. I couldn't make out many features as I got into my car and slammed the door shut. I sped off quickly, scared out of my mind. I raced home, running 2 red lights and not stopping at stop signs. I'm lucky I didn't get pulled over. That brings me to now. I slinked back inside through my window, showered, and now I'm sitting in my bed typing this out. Shit, I need to know more. As dangerous and scary as it was, some twisted part of me just needed to know more. Who was it? Why were they there? Why had the meat not rotted? Why were the registers untouched? What the hell was going on with the grocery store? The man walked in at 2 a.m., dragging something black behind him. The way it moved didn't sit right. Neither did he. The receptionist felt it immediately. The way he walked, stiff and uneven, like a scarecrow with one leg shorter than the other. He had greasy blonde hair beneath a 10-gallon hat, spurs clicking as he moved. I watched the security footage later. His lips were white and thin, his teeth crooked. His mouth twisted into a half-smile, like he was seconds from laughter. He was dragging a massive black Rottweiler. The dog resisted, back paws sliding across the floor. The camera didn't pick up sound, but later, the 2 gals at reception told me what he said. He's acting possessed. They handed him intake forms. He hobbled back to a bench, and I watched through the lens as another client, a woman holding a cat carrier, subtly slid a few seats away. I looked up his paperwork. The address led to a warehouse in Tennessee, 3 states away. The name seemed fake too. Keaton Scruggs. No records. No online presence. But the dog's name? Mutt. That was the only detail I believed. You might wonder why I checked. It's not standard protocol. I don't usually do this. But the events of the last few nights led me to my search. When he handed the paperwork back, he sat down again, dragging the dog with him like a sack of flour. He leaned against the wall, arms folded, eyes fixed ahead. He barely moved, like a corpse propped upright. His dog didn't move much either. Just sat there, waiting. We see a lot of characters here. Some genuinely kind folks, too. But this man, something about him was wrong. I stepped into the lobby to bring him into an exam room. It took him a second to register me, like he was in a trance. And then the smell hit me, stale cigarettes, gas fumes, and beneath that, something worse. A rotten, greasy stench that clung to the air. The dog sat still, vacant, a husk. It was like someone had lobotomized it. As it stood there, drool began dripping from its mouth, pooling on the floor. I introduced myself and got to work. "So, what's going on with Mutt today?" Keaton didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted to the ceiling, like he was watching something flutter above us. "Oh, he just ain't acting right. He ain't been eating much." This is usually where clients start rambling. Some could go on for hours if you let them. But he was done, still staring at the ceiling through those dirty locks of hair. When I knelt to take the dog's heart rate, the second my fingers touched its skin, a wrongness crawled into me. That tingle before lightning strikes. That creeping dread when something awful is about to happen. The vitals were normal, heart rate, breathing. But its skin was cold. 97 degrees, lower than we like. It was mildly dehydrated, maybe 4%. But when I peeled back its loose lips to check its gums, I felt like I was too close to something I shouldn't be. The gums were pale. The pupils locked onto me, dilated. It wasn't growling. No hackles raised. Just watching, like it was restraining itself. That feeling of unease was sickening. "Don't turn your back on M," the man said. I paused mid-turn. "Excuse me? If you're gonna walk from him, do it fasten. Otherwise, something bad might happen." I exhaled sharply, irritated. He'd watched me get close to the dog, lean in, listen to it. Yet now he decided to warn me it was aggressive. I liked this situation less and less. The man, the dog, the way this whole thing sat in my gut like spoiled food. I backed away, facing the dog. It watched me, intently, like I was prey, like I was meat. A few moments later, our on-site emergency veterinarian, Dr. Harkham, came in. Old school, no nonsense. He and Keaton exchanged few words. The vet recommended blood work and an overnight stay within 4 fluid drip. The dog needed warming up too. Keaton never lost that dumb smile, that half-cocked grin, like something was hilarious. But he nodded, accepted the treatment plan. We went to take the dog into the back treatment area. I slipped a muzzle on, of course, and that's when I noticed it wouldn't walk. The owner had dragged it behind him earlier, but now, it wasn't lethargic. It was choosing not to move. I had a larger male staff member, Ryan, carry the dog for me. As he picked it up, he glanced at me. We didn't exchange words, but I knew he felt it too. Not just the dog, the air. When we went to draw blood from its jugular, it didn't even react. Ryan held the dog steady, hands firm on either side of its head, jaws up. The needle slipped in. The syringe filled. The blood was cold. I ran it through the machines. Just mild dehydration. Some elevated lipase hinting at pancreatitis. No infection. Nothing to explain why it was so cold. We placed it into a heated kennel, tucked it in with blankets, hooked up the 4 catheter. I was relieved when Keaton left. That was 3 days ago. That night was quiet, rare for an emergency hospital. We had another dog kenneled 2 spaces down from the Rottweiler, a cattle dog that had undergone emergency laparotomy. It had been doing fine. Normal vitals. Good appetite. Responsive. 2 hours later, I checked on it, and the cattle dog was dead. It had torn open its own incision. Somehow, it had gotten its cone off, and it had attacked itself. Not licking, not nibbling, mutilating. Even when coils of intestine unfurled from its abdomen, it had kept biting at those guts. Like they were coiled snakes, and he was killing them. The dog was slouched over, head limp against the floor. The blood ran in bright ribbons, swirling toward the kennel drain behind him, which slurped up the blood greedily. The kennel was a bloodbath. It streaked the walls, spattered the ceiling. His intestines had leaked bile and partially digested sludge. The cattle dog's eyes were vacant orbs, glistening in the light. I stood still for a moment, taking in the horror, the violence, and 2 kennels down. Mutt, sitting, watching, fluid drip running, heater humming, lips curled back, not panting, not whining, just smiling. His eyes reflected the fluorescent light, and for one sickening second, they looked almost human. Calling that cattle dog's owner was one of the hardest things we've ever done. Dr. Harkham made the call, but I heard every word, every choked sob through the thin walls of our office. The owner didn't just cry. They wailed. I'd seen plenty of death in this job, but this was different. This wasn't bad luck. Something else had its hands in this. The mood in the hospital shifted. In all my years, I'd never seen a dog unzip itself like a gym bag and spill out its intestines. Each time we walked past Mutt's kennel, his head turned slowly to follow. Each bloody towel. Each mop bucket. Every time we passed that black body bag, the cattle dog-sized bag, zip-tied and labeled, Mutt watched. That night was quiet, but it didn't feel like a break. It felt like the storm waiting to hit. At some point, hours after the cattle dog's death, I heard the steady beeping of a monitor from the kennel ward. The 4-pump hooked up to Mutt. I didn't want to go, but I did. I brought Ryan. We slipped the muzzle over Mutt's head easily. Too easily. He didn't resist, didn't flinch, just let it happen. His eyes followed the movement of our hands as we buckled it snugly behind his head. Only his eyes moved. 2 dark orbs. Watching. Digesting. The dog had kinked the 4-line beneath its paw. We moved it aside, smoothed it out. That should have been it. A simple fix. But as we turned to leave, the light above his kennel flickered. At first, just a slight flicker. Barely noticeable. Then it sputtered, dimmed, and cut out completely. The kennel dropped into shadow. Ryan and I froze. The only light now was a faint glow from the hallway behind us. We exchanged a glance. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us wanted to acknowledge what we were feeling. The air in the room changed. Heavy buzzing, like the static before a storm. Then the 2 tube lights above Mutt's kennel flared so bright it hurt to look at them. A pop, then a sizzle. And they died. Everything was silent. Ryan's back was to Mutt. Mutt lunged. A surge of violence, muzzle strapped tight, body lunging forward. He slammed his head against Ryan's side, ramming into him again and again. Ryan screamed. The dog was silent, except for the mechanical snapping of his jaws, working beneath the muzzle. Spittle flying. Ryan twisted, trying to stand. But the sudden attack had taken him off guard. I reacted without thinking. Threw open the kennel door. Mutt rammed into Ryan again, harder this time. The sheer force knocked him off balance. Ryan writhed around to grab at Mutt. The moment he faced Mutt, the dog stilled. It stood there, silent, watching, bathed in the new darkness. Something was wrong with this dog. Not neurologically. Something deeper. It felt intelligent. It felt calculating. It felt evil. Ryan was shaken, and so was I. But we didn't talk about it. We just got out of there. The rest of the night passed without incident. I focused on my other cases, a Chihuahua with pneumonia, a Persian cat having low-grade seizures, a tabby with proprioception deficits. I went through the motions, but my mind was elsewhere. Ryan seemed dazed, like something fresh had broken inside of him. It wasn't just shock, or trauma, or fear. It was more profound than that. I left for the night still shaken. Ryan didn't even wave goodbye. I chain-smoked cigarettes in my car before driving home. Flicked the butts out the window. My hands were shaking the entire ride. And when I finally collapsed into bed, I pulled my pistol out of my purse and slipped it under my pillow. And as the sun crept over the horizon, my dreams were wrong. I dreamed of a black face snarling in the dark, leaning in, sniffing, eyes like hollow pits, endless swirling voids, teeth sinking into my flesh, not a bite, not an attack, but a slow, deliberate pressure, easing into my skin. When I woke, my sheets were damp with sweat. When I came in for my shift that night, I felt a deep sense of disappointment the second I walked past Mutt's kennel. He was still there, heater purring, eyes following. The lights above his kennel were still blown out. The ones beside them had started to flicker. Ryan called out sick, said he'd been throwing up since the night before. I had a feeling there was more to the story, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. I shot him a text wishing him well. He read it, didn't reply. And that sinister, eerie man who called himself Keaton? His phone went straight to dial tone when we tried calling for a case update. He wasn't coming back. He'd paid half his bill up front in crisp, old $100 bills. We weren't getting the other half. The night was busier. I told my manager we shouldn't put any other dogs in that ward, but we didn't have a choice. Our small animal ward was on the other side of the building, but for the larger dogs, they had to go there. We admitted a Great Dane with liver disease. There was nowhere else to put him. So I placed him in the kennel farthest from Mutt, 2 down from the cattle dog that had ripped itself apart. When I went back to check on them 10 minutes later, I stopped cold. Mutt's kennel was wide open. The latch was undone. The door swung open. He wasn't on fluids anymore. No pump to beep. No leash. No sign of how it had happened. Just him, sitting at the threshold, staring, slack-jawed. I shut the kennel, latched it securely, left the room, came back with 2 plates of food. Immediately I felt nauseous. The kennel was open again. I hadn't heard a sound, hadn't seen the door move. The only way to unlatch these kennels is with hands, with opposable thumbs. I slammed it shut again, this time locking it with a makeshift carabiner clip. I slid 1 plate of food under each kennel, low fat for the Dane, critical care for Mutt. I was walking away when I heard it. A sound that froze me. Not a growl. Not a whine. It sounded like someone trying to speak through a mouth full of water. Like a deep, male voice gargling on words before spitting them out. A dog trying to talk. I turned. Mutt sat there, watching. Silent now. Something tingled in the air. But the Dane had begun to cry. His plate of food lay spilled across the kennel floor. His hackles were raised, his body pressed against the back wall, eyes flicking toward the ceiling. He was feeling something deep and inexplicable. I felt it too. When I reached for the kennel bars, the crying stopped. The Dane's body trembled, then his whimpering changed, deepened. A low, eerie sound, like a tornado siren. Then it stopped altogether. The dog went still. Too still. Then all at once, he attacked his own leg. Not chewing. Not licking. Ripping. Breaking. Deep, pulverizing bites. Bone cracked. Blood spattered the kennel floor. It wasn't a dog in pain. It wasn't a dog in distress. It was something else. Something destroying itself with purpose. I couldn't go in there. If I did, he'd likely redirect onto me, send me to the hospital. I turned and ran, shouting for help as I sprinted through the clinic. Dr. Harkham and two other techs, Angie and Denise, came rushing out of an exam room at the sound of my frantic screaming. I grabbed a rabies catch pole. The Dane was still going. The flesh of its leg hung in shreds, barely attached. Blood spurted like shots from a water gun, pulsing in rhythm with its heartbeats from a severed artery. I slipped open the kennel and looped the catch pole around its neck, tightening it hard, wrenching its head just enough to stop it from lunging. It snapped at the air, frantic but no emotion behind it. Then it latched onto the metal pole. Not out of panic, not out of rage, out of a bizarre corruption of instinct. The sound was unbearable, teeth breaking against metal, splintering, shattering. The flesh of its leg was nearly gone. Just a ragged mess of meat and exposed bone that flapped as it chewed at the metal. I saw part of a fractured canine fall out of its mouth. The catch pole was bloody, dented, but holding firm. The dog was weakening by the time Dr. Harkham arrived, slumping over in the pile of its own blood. By the time we managed to inject a sedative, it was too late. The blood loss was too severe. The Dane fully collapsed to the floor, body twitching, biting. All at once, its eyes glazed over, and it went still. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Mutt, lips pulled back in a snarl, smiling. When is that fucking dog going to leave? I snapped, pointing at him. Dr. Harkham shot me a sharp look. His white coat was streaked with blood. His eyes were dark, hollowed with exhaustion. Something is wrong with it, I insisted. With him. All I see is a dog who just mutilated itself in our care, he said. The second one in 2 days. Don't worry about that fucking dog. We have bigger issues here. I have another owner to call. Another person I have to tell their pet killed itself. Under my watch. He flicked blood from his fingers, dragged a sleeve across his face. He was years past burnout. A shell of his former self. He couldn't see what I saw. He couldn't see the way Mutt watched. The way his eyes lingered over the carnage pooling beneath my feet. Like he was enjoying it. Dr. Harkham sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. We tried calling that creepy bastard again. Numbers out of service. He ditched the dog on us. That meant we had to rehome it. It could take weeks. I couldn't take weeks with him. None of us could. And as I looked into Angie's eyes, I knew she felt the same. The hospital settled into an uneasy silence. The night shift pressed on, but something had shifted. We were all exhausted, hollowed out by what we'd seen. The cattle dog. The Great Dane. The blood. Mutt still sat in his kennel, untouched food at his feet, heater humming. Watching. 2 more lights flickered out while I cleaned. I mopped blood from the floors, the thick iron scent clinging to my skin. The towels we used to soak up the mess were soaked through, a deep, ugly red. And through it all, Mutt never looked away. I told myself I'd figure something out, that I just needed time. But time wasn't on my side. I was dumping a load of bloody towels into the laundry bin when I heard it. Eli Histonson. I dropped everything. A voice, thick and wet, slurred in a way no dog's throat was built to produce. It wasn't a bark. It wasn't a growl. It was trying to speak. And what came out wasn't just a sound. It was a name. My name. Allison. I turned, stomach lurching. Mutt was sitting in his kennel. Still. Muzzle slack. Drool pooling on the blanket beneath him. His pupils swallowed the light. I couldn't move. My brain was trying to rationalize it, trying to shove what I had just heard into a box of normalcy. Maybe I'd misheard. Maybe it was the pipes or a monitor or... But then the smell hit me. Rot. Not just the smell of the hospital, not just the faint antiseptic and animal musk that always clung to the air. This was meat left in the sink for weeks. This was something dead wedged into the cracks of the world. And I realized then, the smell I'd caught when Keaton first walked into the lobby, that greasy, putrid stench. It hadn't been him. It had been the dog. I ran. I grabbed the blankets off the floor, shoved them into the laundry bin, and bolted. My hands shook as I crammed the lid shut. My pulse was a hammer in my ears. Don't turn your back on it. The memory of Keaton's words crawled down my spine like a cold hand. He's acting possessed. I knew what Mutt had tried to do to Ryan. I knew what he wanted to do to me. And now I knew. I wasn't waiting for him to act. I was going to kill him. I kept my head down the rest of the shift, biding my time. My mind wasn't on the cases I took. I worked on autopilot. I went through the motions, but my body was moving without me. And when I got a moment alone, I pulled up 20 milliliters of pentobarbital sodium and phenytoin sodium solution. Euthyssol, the sparkling pink liquid we use to put animals down. I took enough to kill a dog twice Mutt's size. There'd be a discrepancy in the controlled substance log, but I could smooth it out over the next few weeks. A couple of slightly higher doses on euthanasia cases, logged with enough time between them, and no one would notice. I locked the cabinet, slid the syringe into my pocket. I was committing a crime, breaking DEA laws. I could lose my license, my career, even end up in jail. But deep in my bones, I knew one thing. That thing in the kennel, it needed to die. The next morning, when I arrived for my shift, the hospital was heavy with grief. Everyone was crying. Ryan was dead. He'd taken his own life in his trailer sometime after leaving work. No details. No explanation. Just gone. The police had come by to inform us. They didn't stay long. Didn't need to. I knew then. It cemented in my mind what had to be done. I don't know how, but I knew. I didn't wait. I worked through the grief, through the horror, pushing it all into a place I'd deal with later. I waited for the right moment. A lull between shift changes, when staffing was light. I approached Mutt's kennel. His head was cocked, eyes tracking me. He looked almost expectant. I opened the kennel door and slid the muzzle over his face quickly. My hands moved with a sharpness I hadn't felt before. I yanked the straps too tight. My pulse was steady. I leaned out of the room, peered around the corner. No one coming. I held Mutt's paw, feeling for the vein, my other hand already slipping the needle beneath the skin. The syringe in my palm felt hot. I pushed the plunger. It was difficult, so much volume to inject. But I pushed it all. Every last drop. Normally, when an animal is euthanized, it happens fast. They slump. Their eyes stay open. Their bodies give up. Mutt didn't move. I could have killed a human with this much euthyssol. But he just sat there. I stared at him, heart pounding, my breath coming sharp. They usually pass away before the syringe is empty. Their bodies relax, their eyes go distant, the tension of life slipping from them like a sigh. Mutt's body stayed rigid, his breath steady. The drug should have shut him down immediately, but his muscles held, his head remained lifted, eyes locked onto mine. A chill crawled up my spine. This dog should be dead. Then the hallway lights flickered. One by one, the bulbs sizzled out, plunging the kennel ward into darkness. The air thickened, heavy with the weight of something unseen. The heater stopped. The only glow came from the exit sign at the far end of the hall, casting a weak green wash over the kennels. The shadows twisted around me. I couldn't move. The door to the kennel slammed shut behind me. My breath hitched. The silence was absolute. The only sound was the slow, wet rasp of Mutt's breathing. I could feel him in the dark, the weight of his presence sinking like teeth into my skin. Then, Elia Histensen. The voice came from the kennel. Thick, gurgling wrong. A sound like a dog learning to speak, like a throat filled with crunching gravel, trying to shape words. The vowels stretched, dripping with something slick and inhuman. My stomach lurched. I reached for the latch, fingers fumbling, but my hands were slick with sweat. My breathing was too loud. The darkness pressed in. The rot smell thickened, crawling up my throat. Then I felt it. A cold, dead hand closed around my ankle. I choked on a scream. My body jolted as something gripped me, nails pressing into my skin, curling against the fabric of my scrubs. The air turned electric, static snapping against my skin. I turned and ran. The door gave way beneath my shoulder, and I burst into the hallway, feet pounding against the tile. Behind me, I heard the kennel door smash open. The sound of paws, heavy and fast, hitting the ground. He was coming. I sprinted blindly through the dark, my shoulders slamming into the wall as I searched for the door handle. My fingers scraped smooth wood, no knob, no latch, just cold, endless surface. Paws pounded closer. No growling, no snarling, no warning, just movement, a freight train of silence, barreling toward me. I spun, pressing my back against the door. The darkness was absolute, thick and suffocating. The emergency lights had died, swallowing the building in shadow. But I could hear him, breathing. Slow, wet, thick with something I couldn't name. Then a whisper of movement, so close I felt the air shift. I bolted down the hall. No thought, no plan, just instinct. My body moved. I reached my locker, yanked it open, hands scrambling for my purse. The air behind me shifted. A weight. A presence. I felt it before I saw it. A void yawning open. My fingers closed around cold metal. The grip of my handgun. I turned, raised the barrel, and fired. The first shot lit up the hall like a camera flash. In that brief flicker, I saw him, that snarling grin. The second shot. The third. His body jerked, but he didn't fall. His lips were still curled back in that awful rictus. The sixth and final shot hit its mark. The left side of his skull caved inward, the muzzle of his face blown apart. His jaw sagged open, tongue limp. And even as he fell, his head twitched. A violent, unnatural snap of movement. A thick, wet pop echoed down the hall. He swayed. Then finally he dropped. I stood there, gun trembling in my hands, ears ringing. The darkness still pulsed around me, thick and heavy, pressing in from all sides. Then footsteps. Shouts. Voices. Someone grabbed my arm, yanking me back. The lights flickered, buzzed, then flared back to life. And for the first time, I saw what I had done. One shot had buried itself in the tile. The rest had hit him. Mutt lay on his side, his head a ruin of blood and bone. His chest rose once, twice. Then he went still. The bite muzzle was missing. He must have pulled it off somewhere during the chase. I didn't move. The hospital swarmed with people. Cops were called. Questions were asked. I barely registered any of it. They took me into the back office, my hands still shaking, my ears still filled with phantom echoes. I knew what I had to say. I knew how to frame it. Self-defense. I played the part well. The police let me go. Mutt was wrapped, bagged, stuffed in our freezer, waiting for cremation. I took time off work. Spent days in silence, trying to erase the memory of that voice. It didn't work. The morning I was supposed to return for my shift, I got a phone call. Blocked number. I answered. Slow, shaky breathing filled the line. Then, a laugh. Low, drawling, thick with something I couldn't name. A mouthful of tobacco chew. Or blood. You shouldn't have killed it, little lady. Keaton. His voice slithered through the speaker, curling like a snake around my spine. His laughter built, rising, filling the silence. You've just gone and made things so much worse. And as the laughing turned into hollering, the line clicked dead. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, staring at nothing. His words sank into my bones. Gone and made things so much worse. My first thought was confusion. How did he get my number? My second thought was frantic. Those words struck a chord deep inside my marrow. He said I'd made things worse. And for some reason, deep down in my soul, I believed him. A pet now. We call it that. Feed it, watch it, listen for its breathing beneath us. A pet we don't understand. A pet we are afraid of. But not feeding it is worse. Michelle sits on the edge of the bed, her feet over the black. She tilts her head, listens, smiles. I think it decides that. Her skin is cold. It's just storage space. A hatch, a hole, a mouth. Shifting. Spreading. We packed our things, severed old ties, moved into a small apartment. Living area. Single bedroom. Single bathroom. Just big enough to share. Just small enough to feel confined. Conversations looped. The silence settled in like dust. A pet, I thought. We should get a pet. Instead, I found the stories. Not the kind with history. Not the kind with deaths. People swearing their homes were shifting. That the walls had taken on a kind of breath. A presence. Not ghosts. Something else. First the plates. The glasses. A little push, a little shift. Michelle replacing fresh milk with spoiled cartons. My toothbrush damp when I reached for it. Silverware bent at angles I didn't recognize. We had a rule. For 1 month, we wouldn't acknowledge any of it. The game had rules. The game had logic. The light exploded in my hand. December 1st. The month was up. The bed wasn't where it had been before. A few inches forward, maybe less, just enough to reveal a black-edged gap where the floor should be. If I reached in, my arm would emerge tarred in shadow. Michelle went to leave. Turned the knob. Stepped back. I don't know. I just felt off for a second. Her pupils were too wide. The pressure in my skull thickened, like the air itself had gained weight. I reached past her. Twisted the knob. The door opened. We weren't trapped. Not yet. A knock. Soft. Deliberate. One knuckle against wood. I unlatched the chain and cracked the door open. No one. But if I shut the door too soon, whoever knocked would slip away unseen. Michelle sighed. Then close it. A breath of cold air touched my skin. It wants something else. Michelle's voice, thick with sleep. Pressing a photo into my hand. Torn edges. A memory halved. I don't think it's just hungry, she said. I think it's collecting. She dropped the photo in. It was accepted. See, she whispered. It's easy. The electrician arrived at noon. Here for the lights, he said. His posture was slightly off, too still, too measured, like someone who had practiced standing naturally. He set his toolbox on the table. The clasp wouldn't open. His fingers spasmed against the latch. Tap snap. Tap snap. A metronome of metal and bone, syncing with the faint knocking against the pipes, against the mirror. You'll know what to do when the time comes, he said. Then he walked into my bedroom. The bed creaked. Fabric shifted. A metallic rasp against the carpet. A slow, deliberate groan of hinges. When I stepped inside, he was gone. But the bed had moved. We tested it. Tape measure, thread. No bottom to it. Just emptiness. We fed it. The plate. The wedding ring. The picture. It stopped taking food. It wanted more. We lost days. Time skipped. Conversations repeated in new phrasing. The same movements, same patterns, same size. Michelle watched me, head tilted. Her smile just a little too slow. You're adjusting, she said. The hatch has grown. 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. Then a full inch. Then 2. It is still growing. How much bigger? I think it decides that. The walls shift when we aren't looking. A breath in the drywall. The bones of the apartment settling deeper, reshaping. Michelle's fingers drift over the mattress. I think it decides that. I open my mouth to speak, but the words have already been spoken. The words are already gone. The first meal was accepted. Then another. Then my ring. We measured the hatch. It had grown. I measured the hatch. It had always been growing. Michelle ran a thumb over the photograph, the edges curling inward like fingers digesting. I don't think it's just hungry. I think it's collecting. The apartment is a closed loop. I see myself in the mirror, but my reflection stays longer than I do. Steam thickens, swallows the words. LIGHTBU. Michelle calls it an experiment. I call it something else. The food stopped working. We had to start giving it more. The hatch refused the chicken. The hatch refused the silverware. The hatch refused the photographs. The hatch refused the bed. The hatch refused the time. A knock. One knuckle against wood. Not the door. Not the walls. The sound from inside the floor. A pulse beneath us, dull and patient. The knocking moves closer each night. We sleep next to it. We feed it. We adjust. You're adjusting, Michelle says. Her voice is unfamiliar. Her voice is a stretched recording, warping at the edges. The electrician yawned. Too wide. Too slow. His teeth weren't teeth, but different, segmented. You'll know what to do when the time comes. Michelle stands at the threshold. Her pupils are darker now, her hands trembling over the edge of the hatch. Maybe we just never noticed it before. But we did. We did. We did. The tape measure unspools into black. No bottom. No sound. No return. I lost 2 days. Michelle says I was here the whole time. The air is heavier now, thick with waiting. What do you want to give up? She asks. Like the hatch is doing us a favor. Like it's sifting through the weight of what we don't need. Like it knows better. The knocking stops. It is replaced. The hatch is still growing. The knocking woke me. The knocking woke me. The knocking woke me. Not the door. Inside the walls. Rhythmic. Deliberate. I strained to listen, pulse sluggish from the antihistamines. 3 a.m. The light was off. We left it on. We always leave it on. The farthest corner where the walls meet. Paint splitting like old skin. I knew before I touched it. Soft. Wet. Blinking. A single pimpert pupil watching. I stepped back. It peeled. A slow curling motion, damp with sloughing flesh revealing. I don't remember the rest. Heat. A pulse that wasn't mine. Silence stretched too long. Then the knocking stopped. It's not a crawl space. It's not a pet. It is still growing. Michelle said we should stop before it gets too big. But how big is too big? Too big for what? Too big for us? Too big to contain? Too big to feed? The walls feel softer. The apartment exhales when we step inside. Everything shifted overnight. I found a hole behind the couch. Tiny, pinpricked, like a knothole in old wood. I looked through it. It looked back. I dream in knots of muscle and wet breath. The floor drags when I walk. The door doesn't close right. I place my hand against the wall and feel a push back. Michelle doesn't seem to notice anymore. She smiles in the dark, teeth catching the light. It's fine, she whispers. We just have to give it what it wants. I ask her what it wants. She tilts her head, listening, and the walls shudder like lungs filling with air. Growth escalation, altered states, the opening, unexplained first manifestations. A construct, a room in the mind. Michelle's hands hovering above the hatch. My hands pressed into soft walls. The room shifting, curling, breathing. The first knock. The first whisper. A cabinet door flinging open. Michelle's wedding ring vanishing. We had been together for years. The bed moved. The walls widened. The hatch waited. I ran my fingers along the wood, measuring, marking. It grew. Always. A pulse beneath my palm, a dark thread unraveling. The hatch was not empty. It was not hollow. It was feeding. Michelle whispered to it. I watched. I did not interfere. We were feeding it, yes, but we had been feeding it long before we found it. The walls had already shifted. The light had already warped. The apartment had never been ours. The first meal. A plate slid forward, vanishing. No sound. No fall. Just gone. The electrician said, "You'll know what to do." The mirror fogged. Words written by hands that were not mine. I stepped closer. The hatch yawned wider. We sat at the kitchen table, eating breakfast. The knocking came. A cold breath across my skin. Michelle did not flinch. She was waiting for it. Expecting it. How much bigger? I whispered. Michelle smiled. It decides that. She dropped into the hatch. A photo. A ring. A thought. A memory. The apartment folded inward. The tape measure unraveled. There was no bottom. It had never been empty. It had never been waiting. It had been growing. And it was still growing. The walls soften. The hatch opens. I reach inside. It accepts me. Knocking came soft at first. Somewhere inside. Behind walls, under floorboards, in the blood-thread seams of the apartment. Michelle stirred but did not wake. I lay beside her, skin pressed tight against a world too small. Stale air pooled in my lungs. My body sank. The apartment breathed out, pulling me deeper. A voice through the walls. Not speech. Not sound. A slow, creaking flex of pressure, stretching the space we lived in. I rolled onto my side, feeling my weight shift, waiting for the apartment to settle back. But it didn't. It held. Suspended. A waiting pause. I moved my lips, but no words came. They didn't need to. The apartment already knew. A knock. Closer this time. The walls pulsed. Life behind them, pushing, pressing through layers of paint, plaster, time. Michelle exhaled in her sleep, voice catching in the space between dream and waking. The light flickered, dimmed, skinned itself raw in the wiring. The air grew dense with the smell of ozone. I pressed a hand to the mattress. The pulse came from below now. Slow, patient. The hatch had opened wider. There was no furniture now. No objects. Just space. The apartment, stripped to its ribs, stretching wider than the building allowed. The floor no longer met the walls. The walls no longer met the ceiling. Just distance, expanding, an aperture widening in the skin of the world. Michelle opened her eyes, but they weren't hers. A deep red pinprick flickered at the center, wide and unblinking. She smiled. We need to feed it. I nodded. We both knew what came next. The hatch yawns wider. It is not a hole. It is a mouth. A wound. A thought split open, scattering like insects under a flickering bulb. Michelle whispers things in her sleep, but she is not asleep. I see my own hands move before I feel them, reaching into the black, fingers sinking past the surface like they've always belonged. The walls pulse with a slow, breathless rhythm. Not alive, not dead, in between, dreaming itself into being. The furniture shifts, pressing outward, rearranging itself in configurations that almost make sense. I find a chair where there was no chair. A door where there was no door. I open it, and the apartment is still here. But different. Stretched. Warped. Michelle is in the kitchen, standing too still. Her head tilts slightly, as though listening to the floor. She turns to me. "You're adjusting," she says. I don't ask what that means. I don't need to. There is a knocking sound, but it is not from the walls. Not from the hatch. It is coming from behind my eyes. I press my hands to my face, trying to steady myself, trying to hold myself inside my own skin. The hatch pulses. The apartment breathes. The knocking continues. It's trying to get out. Do I let it? I know it sounds paranoid. I know it's instinct, muscle memory. Someone knocks, you check. It's normal. It used to be normal for me too, until I learned it wasn't. I've always hated being contacted out of the blue. A random number calls me. I won't pick up. If it's important, they'll leave a message. Ever had a coworker message you on Teams without any prior warning? Took me a while to get used to that. But the worst? The absolute worst is someone knocking on my door unannounced. It started back in university. I was living in a tiny apartment, just me and a lot of bad habits. I'd be smoking or maybe just too busy to clean, and then knock knock. The sound would hit me like a punch to the chest. My whole body would go stiff. I'd tiptoe over, careful not to make a sound, and peek through the peephole. Most of the time, I didn't open the door. Just pretended I wasn't home. Was it introversion? Paranoia? I don't know. But it stuck. 15 years later, in a dozen different apartments, I still did it. When someone knocked, I tiptoed to the door, checked, and if I didn't feel like it, I wouldn't open up. Maybe some unresolved anxiety. It worked. I didn't have to deal with unexpected visitors, and if it was important, they'd find another way to reach me. I thought it was fine, until 2 weeks ago. It was a Friday night. A long week at work. For the first time in a while, I let myself relax. I smoked a little, played video games with some friends. The night was mine. I had my headphones on, fully immersed, when I felt it. A sound like a knock, just on the edge of my awareness. I pulled my headphones off, my heart skipping. I held my breath. Listened. Nothing. It must have been my upstairs neighbors. They have a kid who's probably staying up late. I shrugged it off, put my headphones back on. Mistake. The night went on, but that sound kept coming. Knock knock. Just faint, rhythmic tapping like something waiting. I ignored it at first. Maybe it was the weed playing tricks on me. Maybe I was just tired. But then, by 2 a.m., I'd had enough. I logged off, crawled into bed, and scrolled through my phone before I could sleep. That's when I heard it again. Slow. Deliberate. No mistaking it now. A knock. Right at my front door. My stomach dropped. I sat up, heart racing. My mind scrambled for answers. Emergency? A late-night visitor? But why hadn't they knocked harder? Why wasn't there panic in the knock? Why so patient? I slid out of bed, my breath shaky. I moved carefully, trying to make no sound. I grabbed my phone, using its flashlight to guide my steps, but I turned it off before reaching the door. I didn't want them to know I was awake. I crept forward, pressing my eye to the peephole. The cold rush of dread flooded my veins. There was someone standing there. Their back was to me. The hallway was a dead end. It's not like they were facing another door. Nothing, just starting at a well. Tall, broad, dressed in black. The sound of their breathing, deep, slow, heavy, echoed through the silence. My skin crawled. My mouth went dry. Every instinct in me screamed at me to move, to do something. But I couldn't. I just stood there, frozen, watching through the peephole. And then, it twitched. Not a step, not a turn, but a violent shudder. Like something inside it was broken. A glitch. The body was unhinged, for just a second. It did that a few more times. It seemed to jerk backward, though it didn't turn. It wasn't a normal retreat. It was moving backwards, but not towards me. It was almost mechanical. I kept looking through the peephole. The hallway was empty, and it stayed empty. I barely slept that night. Every little noise made me flinch. Every shadow felt wrong. The knocking, though, it didn't stop. Every night, at exactly 2:30 a.m., it came. Slow, methodical, unhurried, and I couldn't stop myself. I crept to the door, heart pounding, and peered through the peephole. It was always there, always in the same spot, always facing the wall. The second I saw it, my stomach would twist with dread, like ice spreading through my veins. But still I'd check. I had to. Maybe I thought if I didn't, it would get worse. My bad habit had the best of me, and I truly couldn't ignore it. I know what some of you are thinking. Why didn't I call the police? or go stay somewhere else. Well, I had nowhere else to stay, and what was I going to tell the police? Some guy knocks on my door, and I don't answer, and then he leaves me alone. This was definitely creepy, but it was probably some stupid prank that's gone too far. Last night, though, something changed. The knocking started like usual, the rhythmic tap, tap, tap against the door. But I was already in bed. I hadn't fallen asleep yet. I sighed and rolled over, ready to check it as I always did. But this time, when I looked through the peephole, there was nothing. Nothing at all. No one stood in the hallway. No tall, broad figure. Just empty space. I was already pulling away from the door when I heard it again. This time, it came from behind me. The knocking was at my bedroom door. My blood ran cold. My body froze. The knocking came again, slow and deliberate. I turned my head, panic rising in my chest. The hallway was dark, the bedroom door shut tight. Knock, knock, knock. Louder, rattling the wood. My legs trembled, and I frozen between my front door and my bedroom door. I didn't know what to do. The doorknob turned. I stumbled backward, gasping. My heart felt like it was about to explode. The air grew thick, suffocating. My breaths came in shallow bursts, like I couldn't get enough oxygen. Knock, knock, knock. The last one was a crash, a thunderous bang that shook the walls. And then silence. I didn't move. I couldn't move. It felt like hours before the first light of morning crept through the blinds. Only then did I dare go into my bedroom. It was empty. Tonight, I know it will come again. But I won't look. Not this time. Because I know if I do, I won't be looking at it. It will be looking at me. So, a few days ago I had a weird experience. I would have dropped it if it didn't stick with me like this. I'm putting it here for either answers or assurances. Power outages are a very normal part of my life. It was practically part of my weekly routine. The city couldn't afford to keep everyone at full power all of the time. The lights have never been an issue for me, and I've never had this particular problem before. There's still a chance that this didn't really happen, but I'm not sure anymore. The lights had shuttered off right as I slid the deadbolt of the door closed. The faint scent of mildew suffocated by air freshener welcomed me home to my cramped, dingy apartment. I set down my grocery bags onto the creaky dining table after locking the door, placing the paper bag with my dinner onto the stovetop. I had lived here long enough to know my way around the almost claustrophobic area in the dark. I called out to Boris, my roommate of 5 years, to let him know I was home. Even with the poor condition and small space of the apartment, I couldn't afford it on a single income alone. Customer service doesn't pay enough for me to live on my own. Luckily for us, though, I had managed to take home some leftovers from work, meaning neither of us would have to cook dinner that night. I had been expecting some kind of response. Boris normally would yell back at me to keep my voice down, or that the dishes still needed to get done. Today, however, I was met with silence, the rhythmic tapping of our leaky faucet the only sign of movement. Given the late hour, I had simply assumed that Boris had gone to bed early. After all, Boris had been up all night studying for his calculus exam the night before, so he probably crashed right as he got home. The groceries were methodical, vegetables in their designated drawer of the ice box, placing perishables in the fridge, placing cans in the pantry, ignoring that nagging urge to turn the lights back on. It wouldn't do anything, but being unable to see properly would always take a bit of getting used to. The sink was filled to the brim with precariously placed dishes. We didn't have enough space for an automated dishwasher, and Boris hated doing dishes more than he hated doing his coursework, so the responsibility always fell to me. I figured that since we were having pre-prepared food, I could put off doing dishes until later that evening. I sighed in resignation and decided to make the short walk over to the bedroom. We only had one, taking turns sleeping on the creaky couch. I had to wake Boris so that he knew there was cooling food waiting for him. I flicked on the flashlight of my phone, shining it into the room. There were a few clothes on the floor, tests and papers scattered around the floor, as well as a few dishes. A run-down laptop blinking away in the corner. The bed was empty. I frowned into the empty room. Boris wasn't the most social person, so it was hard to believe that he was having a night out. I would have left it alone, but it really wasn't like Boris to leave without saying anything. He even sent me a text before leaving to go to his classes in the morning, or before he went to work. I turned to the light of my phone and sent him a text. "Where even are you?" I stood in the dark of my apartment, listening to the faint hum of the heater. Boris was never the best at responding rapidly, so I wasn't going to hold my breath for an immediate response. I slowly made my way back to the kitchen area, hoping the lights would turn back on so I could lose this gnawing feeling. I knew it was illogical, but the dark made me feel uneasy. I hated that I didn't know where Boris was. He could be anywhere. My mind jumped to the worst-case scenarios. He could have gotten into a car wreck. He could have been mugged or shot. Boris could be. My phone buzzed. Go outside. I let out a sigh of relief. It was entirely like Boris to go stargazing during a power outage. I hadn't noticed him on the stretch of lawn the complex had when I had showed up with the groceries, but I had been pretty distracted when coming in, so it's entirely possible that I just missed seeing my roommate. I figured I should still probably let Boris know about the food while it was still relatively fresh, common courtesy, and all that. It had long gone cold, but I figured it was better late than never. I stepped out into the sharp night air, feeling a slight shiver as I stepped onto the metal landing of their apartment complex. The dark of the night was almost suffocating. It seems silly saying now, but I could almost feel that childlike fear of monsters returning as I looked out into the black. I couldn't see the stars. I couldn't even see faint city lights. I couldn't see a thing. Boris? I called out into the black. There was no response. I took a cautious step forward, moving further onto the landing and pulling out my phone to turn the flashlight back on. The battery was low. Boris? I called again, voice shaking slightly. Fear slowly seeped into my thoughts. The light didn't reveal much. It should have gone much further than it actually did. The lawn wasn't even in view. Only the rails of the landing. It was unreasonably quiet. Even my shouts couldn't cut through the silence. We live in a big city. There is always shouting and honking, cars driving through no matter the hour. It was eerie to have a quiet so complete. I could only hear my heart beating in my chest. I tried telling myself to calm down, but I couldn't think of a reasonable explanation for what was happening. The city was never quiet. Even with their frequent power outages, you could still hear the thrum of people and cars and life. It was as if the city was dead and I was left with the remains. I called out for Boris again, stepping further and further away from the apartment, calling his name for my neighbors, for anyone who could possibly hear me. There was no response. I was starting to feel the creeping edge of panic, heart thumping and almost imperceptibly increasing in pace. What was I even supposed to do? Go to sleep and pray that it would be over when he woke up? That actually didn't sound like too bad of an idea. I quickly swiveled on my heel and walked the 5 paces to get back inside. I reached my destination, apartment number 426. I pulled on the handle only to be met with the clicks of a closed and locked door. It didn't make any sense. I double-checked the number, trying the door again to no avail. I quickly shoved my phone away and rummaged in my pockets for the keys. I fumbled to unlock the door, sliding the key in the lock and turning, trying for the handle again. The deadbolt had been put in place. I was locked out of my own home. It couldn't be real. It had to be a sick joke. I had started pounding on the door. This isn't funny, Boris. I yelled at the door, slamming my fist against the door, suddenly furious that my roommate would do something like this. The quick movement of my arms warmed me up slightly. My threats were met with silence. There was no response even when I offered to do his laundry for a month. No matter what I said, I was met with a cold, hollow silence, as if the air was swallowing my cries and pleas. I tried calling Boris, only to have all calls go straight to voicemail. I called 911, my mom, anybody. Nobody picked up. There were no signs that anyone else was even alive. Even Google didn't bring up any results. Do you need help? A voice called from the left of me, the noise almost deafening in the silence. I almost jumped out of my skin at the intrusion. The voice sounded strange, almost like a mockery of something familiar. Dimly I registered that the voice had come from the left. The stairs onto the landing were from the right, meaning the voice was from someone who lived in the area. Despite how odd the entire situation was, I wasn't going to turn down the company or the help. Yes. I'm locked out of my apartment. I stumbled back from the door and moved to pull my flashlight out for the man to my left, eager to see the man who had come to my aid. Don't, he said suddenly, before I had the chance to do anything. I paused. Don't what? That light isn't going to help anything. You'd just be drawing attention to yourself. His voice said smoothly. Okay, I replied slowly, feeling dread and apprehension crawl into my system. Well, my roommate won't let me back in and dash. Give me your keys. The man said. I hated the idea of this man going into my house. I didn't want to hand over the keys to my apartment, especially not to this stranger. No, I can do it, I assured. It's not about ability. It's about opening the door. Your roommate isn't home to open it. The man said easily. Aye, is there any other way to get inside? I asked. I could hear the smile on the man's face when he replied. I suppose we can always look for your friend. I hesitantly agreed, and felt the air shift around me as the stranger walked past. I followed the sound of footsteps. The sound was offset, distorted to my own ears. The sound of shoes against metal muffled and amplified in the space. I followed in almost complete silence before I swallowed my apprehension and eventually asked a question. So who even are you? I asked the stranger. I'm a friend. The voice replied airily, sounding entirely too distorted to be human. I'm here to help you, to save you. I was unsettled by that answer. I knew I would feel much better if I could see. If only I knew where I was or what was going on. Instead, all I had was the scent of my own breath and the rushing of blood in my ears. I was led down the steps of the apartment, hearing the switch from my shoes clanking on metal to the easy click of cement. My hand on my phone, and the cold of the night grounding me as my thoughts screamed at me that something was wrong. I felt increasingly uneasy as I was led away from the apartment. I was getting further away from my only safe point. Even when trying to keep logical and calm, the panic was settling into my gut. I tried to ground myself, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I kept coming back to the voice of the stranger. Something wasn't right. With every step further away, I felt more and more trapped. I was a fly waiting for the spider. I was a rabbit caught in a snare. I had to run, and I had to run now. Whatever was leading me away was not a friend. It was not human. I didn't really know how I knew, besides the realization that the voice that it was speaking in was a direct mirror of my own. Twisted and distorted, but almost unmistakable. Not wanting to second-guess myself, I took my opening and ran as fast as I could, feet pounding to the beat set by my own heart. I fumbled for my phone light, almost dropping the phone in the process. I used the light to see the pavement as I ran. I could hear the sound of something following me. It wasn't footsteps, it wasn't human, it was just following right behind me. I glanced behind me, shining the light as I went and briefly spotting a spindly white limb moving in a blur. I made it to the stairs with whatever it was seconds behind me. Ignoring the ache of my bones and the exhaustion in my frame, I ran, adrenaline fueling my every movement as I clambered up the stairs. On the third landing, I tripped, slamming into the cold metal of the floor. Phone skidding from my hands, the light breaking as the thing got ever closer. The light wasn't consistent anymore, flickering on and off as I moved to my feet, barely managing to pick up the fading light as I stood. Run. I had to run. I managed to get to the fourth landing and grabbed my keys, praying that the door would be unlocked. I tried the door once locked. I jammed the key into the lock as I heard the thing behind me finish climbing up the stairs, phone held in my teeth as I caught a glimpse of what looked like incredibly pale skin. The door unlocked and opened. I bolted inside and moved to slam the door behind me. The door caught on an arm, long and pale, and forcing the door open with more force than I could possibly fight against. Don't you want help? The thing asked, in a twisted alteration of my own voice, trying its best to claw its way into my home. The sound of its voice, of my voice, shattering any bravery or resolve I might have mustered up. I gave up the losing battle of keeping the door closed and ran, shoving past the creaking table and almost tripping over piles of half-folded laundry. I had made it to the bedroom right as my phone finally died. The flickering light stayed off. I scrambled for anything, something to fight with or hide in or anything. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. I was dead. I was going to be torn apart by the thing that had taken my voice and offered me help and lead me away, and I felt something grip my arm, and I froze with pure terror, unable to move, unable to scream. The lights flicked on. Boris was standing in front of me with a concerned look in his eyes. I nearly cried with relief. The power had returned. Whatever had happened was obviously some kind of messed up nightmare, and I was fine. I had never hallucinated before, but that seemed the most logical answer to why I had a scraped knee right then. Any possible thoughts of other worlds and alternate dimensions were to be shoved out of my thoughts immediately because they were ridiculous. I instinctively dismissed any thoughts that what had happened could have been real. I was in my house, right where I had been when I had sent Boris the first text. Boris probably came back from his stargazing and had found me on the ground. I shakily started to laugh, unable to process the situation any other way. I just had to do something that wasn't scream or run or cry. Whoa, Boris said, looking nervously at me. I'm really sorry to have scared you like that, he said, rubbing his hands on his neck. I waved him off, composing myself just enough to be convincingly normal. I was just wondering why you didn't shut the door, he said. I continued to dismiss him, and we ate dinner. Only after the fact did I really think about what he said. I know that I locked the door, I know that I shut it. I know this for a fact, so it makes no sense that the door was open. Boris had no reason to lie about it. I've never hallucinated before, and I get almost 8 hours of sleep every night, so there's no reason for me to have hallucinated this. But I can't think of anything else that would make this make sense. So I'm wondering if you guys have any ideas or theories as to what happened there. My dog Max is almost 6 years now. He's always been a calm, easygoing boy. The kind of dog who lets you know if someone's at the door, then flops down for a belly rub once you tell him everything's fine. He's never been much of a barker, and I've always taken it as a good sign that he only makes noise when there's a reason. That's why I couldn't ignore it when the barking started. It was about a month ago, always around 2 or 3 in the morning. I'd be just about asleep, and suddenly Max would go off, sharp and frantic. Not as usual, someone's walking past bark. This was desperate, panicked, the kind of bark that makes your stomach drop before you even know why. Every time, I'd get up, check the windows, check the front yard, even the backyard. There was never anything there. No animals, no branches tapping the glass, nothing out of place. Still, Max would stand stiff-legged at the back door, barking at the dining room window like his life depended on it. I tried everything, closing the curtains, leaving a light on, sitting with him until he calmed down. But no matter what I did, as soon as I went back upstairs, the barking would start again, sharp bursts, then long pauses, like he was waiting for something to move. I kept telling myself it was a fox or some stray cat he could smell, something out there I just couldn't see. But Max wasn't barking at the yard. He was barking at the window itself. 2 weeks in, I was wrecked. 3 hours of sleep a night, if I was lucky. I was barely functioning at work, and at home, I was starting to flinch at every creak the house made. Even during the day, Max would drift over to the dining room, stare at the curtains, then wander away again like he was expecting something to be there. Then one night I forgot to draw the dining room curtains before bed. I'd been too tired after a long shift at work, and it slipped my mind. When the barking started around 2 a.m., I was already half awake. I was halfway down the stairs before I realized the house felt colder than usual. Max was standing in the middle of the living room, completely still, body tense, ears flat against his head. His whole body was rigid, but his mouth was shut. Instead, a low growl rolled from his chest, deep enough that I felt it more than heard it. I followed his gaze. There was a face in the dining room window. It was pressed against the glass, just inches away, too pale, the skin stretched too tightly over the bones beneath. But it was the eyes that stopped me cold. They weren't just staring into the house, they were locked directly on me. Wide, bulging, too round for the face they were set in. The whites seemed almost gray, veined with something darker, and the irises were a washed-out yellow, like old paper left in the sun too long. They didn't blink, didn't move, just held my eyes in place like it was waiting to see if I'd come closer. The mouth was stretched into something almost like a smile, but too eager, too sharp at the edges, like it was trying to mimic a human expression, but couldn't quite get it right. Max let out another low growl, louder this time, vibrating in the space between us, and I broke. My hand slammed into the light switch, and the second the room flooded with light, the face was gone. I ran outside, barefoot, heart pounding so hard I felt it in my throat. The yard was empty. The street was still. No footprints, no sign anyone had been there. Just silence, thick, heavy silence, and the cold, damp air clinging to my skin. When I came back inside, Max hadn't moved. He was still standing there, trembling all over, eyes locked on the window, even though the curtain was now drawn. It took me 3 tries to get him to follow me upstairs, and even then, he only came because I begged him. That was 2 weeks ago. Max hasn't barked at night since. In fact, he won't go near that window anymore. During the day, he gives it a wide berth, skirting around the edges of the room like something's still there, even though I can't see a thing. At night, the curtains stay drawn. They always will now. And I'll never forget to draw them again.